Let me know.
Okay, we should be good now.
Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting of Tuesday, July 28th. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Baker,
Here.
Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma is absent at the moment. Mr. Brady,
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Is there public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has submitted public comment.
Thank you. In your packet, you received the minutes of the July 14th meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion and a second.
So moved. Conwell.
Brady.
Baker.
And we have a motion and a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Against? Thank you. 2020-0159.
Resolution number 2020-0159, authorizing a contract with Court Community Service in the amount not to exceed $555,000 for court community placement and supervision services for probationers referred by the court in connection with the Community Work Service Placement and Supervision Program.
I see Mr. Murphy for the court.
Yes. Marty Murphy for the Corrections Planning Board. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. This is our contract with Court Community Services. It is a 3-year contract beginning January 1, 2021 at $185,000 per year. This is the exact same dollar amount that Court Community Service Inc. has been charging the court for the last 10 years. So this will carry them into 13 years. And they have been doing this work with the court since 1994.
Wow. Thank you. Questions from the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Murphy. I know the Court Community Service and what they do very well. Did the individuals still have to go out during COVID-19 and perform the duties that they have to do? And then I have a follow-up question if your answer is yes.
My answer is I don't know, but I can find that out for you, Councilwoman.
Because they are out to pick up, whatever garbage or whatever needs to be done in parks or whatever the case may be. So can you also find out if they were out in the community during COVID-19? And I did see some people, but I don't remember the exact dates. How was the hazard pay handled within the courts? Did they, they figured they were essential, but did they consider them for needing hazard pay?
The crews that go out are actually on contract through Court Community Service, and I don't know if they paid them any different or not. What they have are supervisors that oversee the crews, and then the crews are made up of people on probation that are doing the community service. So the people on probation are not getting paid at all. I can also find out about the crew leaders though.
Okay, thank you. And thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How is this paid for?
This is 100% county general fund.
And you said that this program has been since 1994.
Yes.
So this contract begins January 1st. How come we're 7 months late in asking for this to continue? I guess it's a continuation. And I know I've asked you this before and it's always been, that's the best we can do, but is that, given it's a county funded program, we had plenty of time to know that the last contract was going to be expiring. Do you have a reason for it being so late?
Thank you, Councilman. This is county money, and it is the best we could do. We're 5 months early. It doesn't start till the
Yeah.
20, till 21.
January 2021.
Oh, wow, good for you. I didn't see that.
That's what happens
Thank
if we
you.
have county money.
Wow. I really appreciate that, knowing that you're way ahead of it. Thank you. I didn't even didn't notice that. I appreciate the, thank you. That's great news.
Any further questions? Well, Mr. Murphy, in an odd circumstance here, we don't seem to have to move this forward, so we'll just move it to the committee or the committee of the whole for second reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
It's something rare these days.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Under discussion items, do we have the sheriff available?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
did you all vote? Get a
Oh,
motion?
I'm sorry. I'm
And a second.
sorry. If everything's in order, I'll accept a motion to move 2020-0159 to the full council for second reading.
So moved, Nan Baker.
Second.
Conwell,
We have a move and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you very much. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to discussion items. Item C, I had asked Dr. Gilson to come in and update us regarding the opioid situation in the county. He is, of all things, on furlough, so he won't be here. Hugh sent me an update, and he said that the opioid deaths since he last testified in the committee have been steady and not higher than we had last year, which, while bad news, it's good news that it hadn't spiked up again. When Dr. Gilson's back, we'll bring him in to further discuss this. Item A, inmate population at the county jail. I've been noticing how steadily the numbers are creeping back up. And it's a concern to me, as I know it's a concern to members of the committee. Who's here to speak on that?
Hi, Councilman Gallagher. It's Bob Corey, Chief of Public Safety here. So if in any particular order you would like to do these at your leisure. So Rhonda is going to discuss the increase in the number of inmates over the last few months. She produces through, what's his name? I forgot. Who does your reports?
Coach of ours, Ken Coach.
You might know Ken Kochevar. So he produces these reports, some of which you get. And so she's done an analysis that keys in on exactly what you're going after. So if it's okay with you, she's going to do that presentation.
Yes.
She's also going to discuss the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. She's further, in order to be prepared for this, she had a conversation with Metro Health just to get some refined questions answered for her.
Okay,
And
good.
of course, she'll discuss the Trinity Food Service and how things are going so far. And then there was an item there about discussing communication with council. And I figured that was about how we let you know about issues that arise. I would imagine if not, I could talk to you about that.
Yeah, and it's more about how we're not being informed and how we can better do that. Because I don't want this communication to break down like it did last time. The last time that happened, we had many problems over at the jail. And I'm starting to see a pattern that is a little less than positive. But we'll listen, we'll hear Rhonda and see what she has to say here.
So also, just so you know, the sheriff is here and Chief Smith are here also, just in case there's any other questions.
Thank
So
you.
with that, I'm going to turn the chair over to Rhonda.
Good afternoon, council members.
Good
Rhonda
morning.
Gibson.
Good afternoon.
the Administrator of Corrections for the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department. And we'll talk about the inmate population first, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Back in May, I started to put together some data related to intakes and releases since we didn't have a specific report. We do have a report that shows average daily population, which council does get a copy of that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I actually separated intakes and releases for part of May, entire month of June, and July so far. We are obviously seeing an increase in intakes, specifically the last 3 months. For May, starting May 12th, which was when I started putting those statistics together, there was a total of 763 intakes. So that's partial month. But it did create an average number of intakes of a little over 38 for that month. June, for the entire month, there were 1,085 intakes, which represented an average of 36 a day for June. July so far, we're looking at an average number of almost 44 intakes for the month a day. So obviously there's a jump of at least 8 intakes a day between June and July. Now, when you look at the releases, and I'll talk specifically about June and July, June releases average was almost 36 a month. But for July, the average number of releases has been 39, almost 40. So your trend of intakes is a little faster than your trend of releases. So over time, that results in increased numbers of people being held in jail. Now, when you look at where are those intakes coming from, there has been a steady increase in county. Between, in May, there was a 21.5% of the number of intakes were related to county type cases. June, that number went up to 28.3%. In July, we're looking at 33.5% of the intakes are related to county cases. That's to be expected. The courts are doing a slow rollout, trying to get back to some sort of normalcy in their operations. So that doesn't surprise me, that percentage. However, as the county courts start to issue the capiases or enforce the capiases, you're going to have an increase in numbers. We are doing several things in order to try to remedy this. One has been, we have established Zoom disposition hearings, which was a collaboration between the courts, public defenders, prosecutor's office, chief of public safety, sheriff's department, the jail, IT. If I've forgotten anybody, I apologize. But that allowed limited movement of inmates from the housing units, but still allowed court hearings to occur. We established 8 dedicated positions for that from our staffing because we realized the importance of those hearings in order to move cases along and maybe release them from custody if it went that way. The Bail Project continues to have a presence with the jail, and they obviously assist with paying the bail bonds for inmates in custody who meet their eligibility. Last week, there was also an initiative to establish attorney-inmate discovery meetings via Zoom with the laptops. The importance of that is the discovery meetings help to move the cases along so they can discuss the status of the cases hopefully come to a resolution or at least determined to go to trial. They did several of those on Friday as a pilot, and I do anticipate that they will continue to do those again and may even extend to a second day in the week. We continue to work on the project of the renovation for confidential attorney inmate visitation booths, which the Public Defender's Office has been involved in. I was told today that the Bureau of Adult Detention would be approving that project so that Public Works can move ahead with the actual renovation process for that. As far as the average daily population, when you look at May of 2019, our monthly average at that time was 2,171 inmates in custody per day. Today, we're looking at 1,193 so far in July as the average. That puts us almost 170 less per day, as in from May 2019. It's a positive. However, at our lowest, we were at 1,015 in April. So a slow but steady uptick. And we continue to monitor. Special Assistant Kochevar continues to review the cases to see if there's anyone that we can assist to release from custody. He works with the courts daily to try to remedy that. That's the information I have on the inmate population. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions for Rhonda?
I do have some for Rhonda.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have one. It might not be, well, it's related. So through the chair to Rhonda, I sent in a question earlier. I'm just wondering if you've gotten a response. So you send out or Trevor sends us the numbers of the COVID cases that are currently in the jail. And so one of them struck like a concern to me. It had the COVID-19 numbers, the inmates that have COVID-19 that are released from the jail. Are we tracking them and where are they going? For example, homeless shelters or what? And I know you guys are working on that answer for me, but I'm just wondering if you have an answer.
Councilwoman Cromwell, I did do some follow-up on that today. I spoke to Metro Health representatives who I was told might be the person who tracks that. She was out yesterday, so I wasn't able to speak with her then. And she informs me that she does not necessarily track where they go. What she does is she contacts the Department of Health, whatever jurisdiction that person might be in, to indicate that a COVID positive person is being released from jail. And giving the Department of Health their contact information so that they can outreach. But she does not track the exact location. For example, if they are going home, if they're going to a homeless shelter, etc. I then reached out to the county health department to inquire if they track that information. The response I received was that they do document as far as the information that Metro Health is providing where the inmates are going. They do not necessarily track it.
Okay.
So,
don't you think that is that's something that's necessary? I know they had COVID-19 and then they were released, but we still don't know a lot about COVID-19 and if it'll come back, if that person can get it back or whatever the case may be. So I would just think that we would track, especially since we're on the other end of if they have to go to a homeless shelter, because many of them, once they're released, can't go back into their prior places that they were at. And that's costing us money on the other end with the hotels that we're putting people up. So I'd like to try to correlate that information.
Okay. I do know Metro Health works to establish community connections for those inmates to determine locations for them to go. Once we are issued the paperwork to release them from custody, we don't control where they go. The inmate can make the decision. We can offer, or Metro Health could offer a location for the inmate to go, but it doesn't mean that they have to go there. If the inmate wishes to be released to the street, that's their prerogative to do. The referral that's given to the county health department is the follow-up to them to give them the education of the COVID condition that they have and what other resources are available to them.
Well, I know we can, but we can ask, and that's my main concern is that we can ask, because sexual predators, they are made to,
You're muted.
sorry, I don't know if we're at that serious level, but I think there's some kind of way that we should be able to track those numbers. So you're saying I should reach out to Metro Health and Department of Health?
Actually, I will reach out to Metro Health to see if that's a possibility for them to do, because they would need to collaborate with the release desk of the jail in order to have that information. When I spoke to the County Department of Health, she wasn't sure that they would do that at this point. But why don't I try to collaborate with Metro Health and see what kind of solution we can come up with?
Thank you.
Right. I think a follow-up to that, Councilwoman, is once they're released, and we have no authority, no right to even ask where they're going. Now, if they're going to a homeless shelter that the county is running, there's a possibility we could follow it that way. Or if they're probationers, the court would be able to follow it. But as far as Metro, I don't think legally they can even ask that question if they're released to the street or on their own recognizance without any further charges. So we could talk with the court, and we could talk with the homeless shelters, because I would imagine if they go to a homeless shelter that we control, they would have to tell them where they were at, because they're going to want to know. So
Yeah.
that would probably be the best and only way we could find out.
Yeah, but you see the dilemma that I'm in. So, because we have certain hotels that are set up for individuals that may have had COVID, that are currently having COVID, or, are in the waiting period of COVID. So just in light, when most of them return to our homeless shelters, I think that information needs to be known, so.
Well, I don't know what the process is from the county side, but if they're trying to get into housing that we support, I think that's when we have a right to know where they've been or if they have tested positive. And then again, you're hoping that they share that honestly. So it's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just asking for them to track, to see if they could track.
Good question. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Anything further for Rhonda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
first of all, on Councilwoman Conwell's line of questioning, certainly, I would expect most of the inmates are gonna not want to get COVID-19 again or spread it, and so we can certainly ask for their voluntary cooperation to work with the Board of Health around doing that. So even where we're not in a position to mandate it, we can I think in most cases we can get cooperation, and should try to get that cooperation. The question I have is that the inmate population number that we have is right around the number that I've heard in previous presentations. Is the upper limit around which we can effectively create enough single cells to properly isolate the prison population. And in light of that fact, I'm wondering if there's a clear intention to try and hold the inmate population down around this number, and if so, how we're going to try to accomplish that.
Council members, there is a continuing collaboration with the courts every day as far as who's in custody, who needs to be scheduled for court hearings, whether it be in person, if that's what the court wants, or via the Zoom hearings. As I said, we have established many options for attorneys to meet or discuss with their clients, which are the inmates, whether it be in person, whether it be through video visitation, whether it be virtually through Zoom. I think the jail has been accommodating and flexible. I believe that we have been at everyone's disposal to work and to come to solutions in order to try to keep the population down. I think if those efforts had not been done, our population would be much higher than it is right now.
There's a question about that.
Mr. Miller, if I could interrupt, is Ken Kochevar there?
He is not, Councilman.
He is not. Dale, I think that would be our best avenue, is talking to Mr. Kochevar because of his experience with the jail and the sheriff's department for those many years, which was one of the reasons earlier on we were trying to get him to come back. My thought is to talk to Ken at another meeting, bring him in, see what his plan is. I'm under the impression back when Sheriff McFall was around that there was a Monday morning report provided to the sheriff as to who was in jail, who their judge was, how long they've been in jail, when their next hearings were, and things like that, that could really tell us a lot about who's in jail, who's keeping who in jail, and who shouldn't be in jail. And it's an incentive to get the courts to cooperate and move these folks out. We're in a bit of a delicate situation right now because of the times that we're dealing. But to hear Mr. Kochevar, I'm sure has a plan such as that. And I would love to have a report weekly. There's no reason, Rhonda, that you can think of that a weekly report couldn't be generated.
Actually, Councilman, there are reports that are already generated.
Okay,
like
good.
that.
That would, okay. Well, we'll bring in Mr. Kochevar and hopefully he can take us through that. I think it keeps everybody on their toes.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I like very much the direction that you're going in. The only thing that I would suggest is that since the council is about to go into a 6-week recess, I would like if you could try to figure out some way to institute what you have in mind without having to wait until we come back in mid-September.
Fair enough. As a matter of fact, I'll call Mr. Kochevar myself. Now that I know that the reports are available, I'll ask him to put together a separate report telling us what we need to know and what we need to ask as far as who's who and where they're at and why they're there.
Mr. Chairman?
And, yes, sir.
Thank you. Along these lines, if we're talking about population at the jail, I mean, if you're having Mr. Kochevar come in, is there any way we could get anybody from the courts from their end? Because we don't really hear much on their end. I read stories here and there how they're trying to do things with bail reform and such, but I want to ensure, during this COVID situation, we had very low populations, and I don't know that you know, the crime or recidivism was up as a result. And that'd be something I'd like to hear from somebody, if somebody could get that information. Because by all appearances, it seems as if even though we had a lower jail population, it seemed to be working, you know?
Right.
So, you know, it's more of a, it's got to be more of a policy thing in place and some regular decisions made about low-level criminals or probably first-time drug offenders or things like that. You know, from the court's end, because the jail can only do what the judge's, you know, rule on a prosecutor's office, you know, getting involved in. So I'd like to hear from the other end too.
I intend to call Judge Sheehan on that also, to have him participate. Mr.
That'd be
Miller
great.
makes a good point that waiting 6 weeks probably isn't the ideal thing. So I'll make sure that I talk to Judge Sheehan and Ken Kochevar and report back.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for Rhonda? Okay, Mr. Corey.
I was just gonna, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I was just gonna add something to that last bit of the conversation on behalf of the courts. It's notwithstanding that, I'm sure they would be happy to provide additional information. But in large part, what we're seeing is that the court has expanded business, right? As a result of the activity that was suppressed in March and in April, backlogs began to ensue, known backlogs, right? The Common Pleas Court was not doing bail arraignments. They were holding off on capiases for probation violations. The county prosecutor was holding back on low-level felonies for the grand jury. And what's happening is, and we all knew that this would happen, what that gave the jail the opportunity to do was to stand up a COVID response operation. And you know all about that. Council's on the weekly jail update meetings with Metro Health and the jail. And as a result, that gave us huge latitude and time to get our COVID house created. So what had happened was, then the court said, okay, in collaboration with Public Safety Chief Armin Budish, the jail, the sheriff, we need to take the cork off that and begin more court activity, because justice delayed is justice denied. Cases had to move. So in fairness, through a planned activity of ratcheting up court activity, going from 4 judges to 8 judges, having bail arraignments, right? Even having Saturday bail arraignments when necessary, starting up a grand jury, case activity increased, and we saw the intake. At the same time, we saw the Ohio Department of Corrections suspend us from sending inmates. We've got about 90 or so waiting to go to ODRC, but now that they've lifted that restriction, because the jail did such a great job with managing COVID, we're now sending those inmates off. So I can see 100 coming off that in the next, 2 to 3 months, Ron?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and 100 coming off that number without breaking a sweat. Judge Sheehan, Mike O'Malley, Mark Stanton, just to name 3, are looking at these numbers every day, and they're worried about them just as you are and as we are. So maybe what we're talking about, and Rhonda pointed up that we're having these Zoom discovery meetings, because there's cases like murders, rapes, substantially difficult felonious assaults, where people are looking at a lot of time that are difficult to resolve without a real good exchange of discovery. So Rhonda stood up that discovery hearings on last Friday. O'Donnell managed it. And we think that we just started that last Friday, is also going to alleviate getting some deals done on cases to get those numbers down. So we might have to put the stop on some of the cases, the court activity, but I don't think it's in our interest to do that, because those cases aren't going to go away. So we've got to do whatever we can to have disposition hearings on those difficult cases as quickly as possible, without, maybe taking people to court and then increasing the potential for the spread of COVID activity. So maybe we have to put the stopper on a little bit, but we also have to get them out the back end by having more disposition hearings. I think the court can shed light as you're projecting, if they talk to you guys about what activities they can slow down on. Issues of speedy trial have been brought up and managed with the Ohio Supreme Court, but they're pulling that away from them. So the court is in the best position to talk to you about how they're ratcheting up and down court activity. But they have been very, very collaborative with us on protecting the people in the jail, and they are not being, they're not just taking putting the pedal to the metal on having cases. They're doing it sensitively with inmate safety key in their minds.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there a question further from Mr. Corey?
I have one question, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
The early release, I had the same questions that Councilwoman Conwell had the last time we talked about those that have the COVID-19 and are being released and we can't track them, and is there a better way to do it? We kind of went through that whole exercise last time we were together, got the same answers back. But, you know, when we say we can't track those because they're free and not accountable, I mean, we are mandating everyone to wear a mask. We are mandating 6 feet apart. We are mandating businesses. I mean, I would have to guess that anyone released would be wearing a mask. So and if they're caught walking around or going anywhere or admitting they would have to be wearing a mask. So there is some protection there. I don't know. It does seem a bit irresponsible for as much as we're mandating everyone to take these protections, that we take the position that, well, they're free and there's not a lot we can do because they're on their own. I would hope that there would be more that we can do than to release somebody knowing he or she is a liability to someone else's health.
Well, that would be no different than someone with AIDS, someone with another horrible disease that can be transmitted. My point is if they are freed from jail for doing their time or a court released them with no follow-up, no probation, they're no different than myself or you. They're free individuals, and you know, they do have constitutional rights, and that's really what it comes down to. If they've done their time and they've paid their price, there's nothing further we can do. As I said, as follow-up, if they're going into a county facility for homelessness or something like that, there's an opening for us there. But other than that, I don't think there's any. Mr. Corey, do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you one anecdote, and this anecdote is emblematic of what we're doing in terms of going above and beyond the call of duty for the sake of the inmate as well as our public. When we had the very first COVID person released, they had no transportation. Normally, when you're released, you open the doors and they're out on West 3rd. But we had a COVID-19 patient, and we continue to do what I'm about to describe. And so for that first one, Chief Smith was down in the garage together with one of the captains. Rhonda was on the phone, and they were trying to figure out, what are we going to do? We can't put him on RTA. We can't order an Uber. So what we've done, which is unprecedented, is that we tooled up one of our zone cars, put one of our sergeants in full PPE. The chief was going to drive him if we couldn't get, at this point, it's a new process. We're working with the unions to keep them safe, right? And they all stood up and they took that guy to his aunt's house, or to his relative's house, so that they could make sure that he was taken directly to the place where he designated he wanted to go. But at some point, this is where people look for the criminal justice system to become the social services for for all of our society. Councilman Gallagher is absolutely correct. Our legal authority to control where he goes, what he does after that, beyond what you might see in public if he fails to wear a mask, ends at that point. Nevertheless, Administrator Gibson said that she's going to follow up with Department of Health. I'm looking at her and Metro Health to see if we can, and together with Council Miller's idea, to get them to volunteer giving up information so that we can track it. So we're not going to end it at that. You guys had a good idea, and Rhonda's going to see if she can get it done.
I appreciate that. And you do, of course, give that person that's leaving the jail a mask to wear, right?
Oh, yeah, they were they all PP'd up too? Yeah, and they, I'm told that by Rhonda and the chief and the sheriff, they're all, full PPE. Goggles, mask, gown, booties.
But the actual inmate is also wearing a mask. He is asked to wear a mask or he can't leave, is that right? The inmate.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman. Oh, the inmate? Yeah, the inmate's full PPE. That I was describing the inmate's garb, as well as the whoever's transporting them. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
Any more questions regarding this subject? Okay, thank you very much. I have some questions for the sheriff.
If it was about the, let's see, the next issue, I think it was the COVID numbers.
I think we went through that pretty good. I think
okay.
we're good on that. Is anybody concerned further with the COVID? I think Rhonda took care of that.
Trinity, did you want to, Rhonda,
Yeah,
cover Trinity?
Well, in yesterday's presentation, there was a cut in, I don't know if it was the contracts, money off the contract or money off the food purchases. Would that be related to the fact that we're lower than we anticipated as far as population? I might be wrong, but I saw 34.5% cut.
Are you speaking directly about the Trinity contracts, Councilman?
It was Walter P's presentation yesterday, and it had supplies and control costs, food service contract was the heading. It was listed as among the county cuts that the sheriff's department had to take.
Okay, well, depending upon whether you're talking about just food purchases in general, obviously that would decrease since we've entered into the contract with Trinity Services. So that's to be expected. If you're talking about a reduction of the Trinity contract itself, I do know that there was an adjustment made in the cost for the contract, and I do believe it was at a lower rate. So depending upon which item you're speaking of.
No, it was Walter's presentation. It just kind of got my attention. I would assume that there would be an adjustment, and I believe we talked about an adjustment as we went along, because when they first came on, we were up over 2,000 at a time. So I would imagine if we cut that close in half, that the cost would go down, which makes sense.
Correct.
Okay. And Rhonda, I don't think you're the one to talk to about this. I wanted to talk about Trinity itself and the investigation. I don't want to find out about the investigation about the recent events with the smuggling, but I'm really interested why Trinity got rid of an employee, and from my understanding, didn't tell us why.
I think I can answer some of that. So during a review of policies, practices, and let me say this is an administrative review, Trinity found that 2 of their staff had violated policies. So they were immediately removed. And they did tell us that at the time that they terminated those employees. There was a referral for an investigation through narcotics And Chief Smith, I believe, or Sheriff can speak to that, as I'm not involved in that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Good, okay.
Hi, Councilman. So that investigation will be complete early next week, and then we'll have a report on that.
Okay, and you'll share that with council after you share it with the administration?
Yeah, to the extent that we can, absolutely.
Is there any reason that we wouldn't be shown the same report?
We'll have to speak to the prosecutor on that,
Okay.
on whether, yeah.
Fair enough, that's fair enough. Anybody have questions regarding the incident? I know they can't get involved in too much, but I just wanted to make sure that we were part of the loop when it proceeds through its process. And I think maybe you can answer some of these other questions. Is there going to be a report on the riot at the Justice Center? What happened, who was involved? Is that still ongoing?
That is, and we will have a finalized after-action report in the near future.
Okay, no ETA on that?
No, at least a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I best guess.
Okay.
The holdups are, you get those individual.
Right, and we are doing individual use of force reviews for all the officers that use less lethal that day. So those will be completed first, and then the after-action report will be completed, which kind of summarizes everything that happened.
Good, that'll be helpful. And where are we at with the police education program that we moved over to you 2 weeks ago today?
Yeah, right now that's with Chief Corey. I believe he can answer those, any questions that you have on that.
Sure, if he's there.
Yep, he's here.
So Executive Budish asked me to work with the sheriffs on getting them to review the program and to give an analysis of that. They completed that analysis. That is with me. I have completed my review of their report yesterday, and I'm putting together questions that I'm going to review with them today. One of the things that, for example, that I have questions about is that they have concerns about their ability to provide enough overtime hours to do some of the hands-on training. They make the recommendation that they can do the class training, but I want to understand more about what the limitations are on overtime for, as this one example of their ability to do the actual hands-on training where they go to the village, et cetera.
It was a question of overtime from the communities. The hook here is the county picks up the initial cost. There's going to be a cost to the various forces because they're going to have to send officers and pay them to do the day with the hands-on training. So it's not a question of Tri-C worried about overtime. It's a concern that there may be some cities that don't want to do it because of that cost. And that's fine. This is not a program to force anybody's hand. This is a program initiated by law enforcement. And in my opinion, the best law enforcement person that we had here in Cuyahoga County, Sheriff Bova. I left it in the hands of law enforcement. They put this program together. We had a public hearing on this that answered that question, actually. And I personally had the program and the contract copied the day after I got it and given to Mr. Mason and Mr. Budish. Oh, that must have been over a month ago. So I haven't heard of any questions. We had a public meeting. There were no questions after that. So they have any questions now concerns me, and maybe it rolls into our communication situation. No one's approached me with any questions, or Chief Harris out at Tri-C, who really is running this show. They have Friday meetings with all the professors and all the instructors to tweak the program itself. They invite people from the community. Last Friday, was a few folks from the African-American community and the LGBTQ community, getting input and discussion as to their concerns and what may or may not be added. This is a pretty tight program right now, not to say it can't be altered, which is why they have their Friday meetings, but any questions should go to me. I don't anticipate anything holding this up. And if you have a legitimate concern that hasn't been addressed, absolutely, I can answer it.
No, perhaps I misspoke. The executive wanted an analysis from me and the Sheriff's Department as to what we thought of the program. After the presentation with council that occurred, I then asked Chief Smith and the sheriff to do that analysis. They did that with Captain Jerome, who is responsible for much of the training, Captain Jerome. Then they provided that analysis to me late last week. I didn't get to it until yesterday. I reviewed that report in detail, and I had a series of questions that I had to go over with them. One of the questions was, if the Sheriff's Department does this, the Sheriff's Department had a concern about their ability to have all of the staff attend, for example, not the class training, but the on-site training, and their ability to be able to schedule that and get that done. So as one question for them is to get more details about what those limitations were. Is it just questions of overtime? Is it questions of scheduling? Then they had some issues, some cons about maybe their ability, because they have they believe a robust in-house training program, to be able to provide some of that training and maybe better, cheaper, faster, just at some of the areas. But overall, these are questions at the fringe. The thrust of their report to me was that they believe that this was a good program that they can benefit from. So I kind of buried the lead there. As soon as I'm done with my analysis, and while I have them here, I'm going to go over my questions with them, and then I'm going to report to the executive. I would imagine if the executive, and or I have any questions, we would definitely communicate with you, but we just hadn't completed our work to reach out. At least from my perspective, I hadn't completed my work in order to have any questions for you, Councilman, for example.
Well,
I won't delay.
Well, this is a delay, and
Okay.
I don't appreciate a delay, and I don't appreciate. I mean, I can't even tell you how I bent over backwards to get the information to the administration, public meetings, personal conferences and telephone calls, all the meetings that I've had, because it's important, I think. And the only reason I think it's important is because every law enforcement person that I have great respect for, and that's starting with Bolivar and moving on down, has just absolutely blessed this program, thinking that it's needed. So this isn't my opinion. I want to do it right, and I understand the concern for the extra it's going to cost the force, and I include the Sheriff's Department with that. But let's face it, I mean, I'm reading articles. I'm not told anything. I read articles how the sheriff deputy is going to be out writing tickets for people not wearing masks. If we can afford that, we can afford to put our troops, after coming off a riot, where we have lost, my guess is, more than $250,000 of damage to our property. I think it's important that we train our people to be able to handle that and to move forward in helping other communities and forces, if need be, in similar situations. So if you really have any questions, I think you're directing them to me. I will answer them. I anticipate this to be 3 to 4 weeks. It should be put into the system. Any dragging of feet after that, I'll have to do what I have to do to move it forward through our process. I don't see this as a problem, but if you do, if you have legitimate concerns, I want to know them.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, so, again, I'm assuming we're gonna put this in the system, and within 4 weeks, this will be up board of control. If there is a problem with that, I need to know. Because the concern here is the program takes care of 2,500 officers the first year. There are 4,700 in the county. So we're doing half for the 250. That has to be programmed and ready to go with Tri-C. And again, individual communities are going to have to make a decision on if this is important enough for them to train their officers. In the world in which we live right now, I find it hard to believe that anybody would say no. But I understand money is the root of all evil, unfortunately, and we're all scrambling for the dollar. So that was the impetus of the county moving forward with this, but using Tri-C as that institution that's really going to control it. And keeping in mind, that's where our officers go anyhow for the most part, and everybody else's officers. So if there is a concern, please call me off the meeting here, and I'll take you through it, or I'll connect you with Chief Harris, which would probably be more appropriate, considering his background with Cleveland, Cleveland Police, East Cleveland, Tri-C, and his stellar career as one of those law enforcement people that I hold in high regard.
Absolutely, and I will not delay. I'm going to complete that analysis today together with the sheriff and reach out to you if there's any questions. But like I said, I don't anticipate that there will be any, and I'm going to report that out, and I'm sure we'll move from there.
And for your edification, I did speak to the executive yesterday about this also.
Oh, okay.
And initially, when I sent the report to Mr. Mason, I had a conversation with him, and I took him intimately through the program at that time, which really hasn't changed much. So we are where we were, and he was briefed on it immediately.
Understood.
Are there any questions regarding this?
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Tuma.
Yeah, I just have a quick question regarding the program itself. Did you indicate that the county sheriff POs go through this program through Tri-C currently?
It's the deputy sheriffs.
The deputy sheriffs. So I guess to Mr. Curry then, is there a concern about like duplication of information, or?
Let me just reach over there and grab my notes.
Mr. Tuma, while he's doing that, it's going through the sheriff's budget. So the sheriff's really not running this. Tri-C will be running it through Chief Harris.
Right, okay.
So let me get my mouse. Okay, forgive me. All right, so I've got it here. So one of the questions that I had for the sheriffs, for example, was in 2020, they can manage, as I said, sending their deputies to, the live stream portion, right? But they're concerned about sending all 200 deputies to the scenario training and still get them recertified in things that they had, like firearms and less lethal force by the end of 2020, because they need certification for that programming may or may not provide. So I have questions for the sheriff. They're here, and so I will be able to answer those questions. What do you mean by that? Does that mean because would it be a duplication? Would it be that because you've got to get recertification in less lethal force and firearms that you wouldn't have the time? So that's one of the questions I had. Another question is that they have a concern about the logistics of getting 2,500 officers through the training. That could be a question for Councilman Gallagher, for example. But one of the questions I had for them is to elaborate for me on the concerns about how to do that. So I've got a list of bullets of questions I have based upon the report that they gave me. As soon as I vetted those, we would have sealed up, any gaps in what those questions are, and then I would convey that information to Executive Budish. I'm hearing that Councilman Gallagher has already talked to the executive and to the chief of staff, so that will move things along quickly. So the ball's in my court to get that done, and I'll get that done. I don't know if that answered your question fully or in part, or missed the point altogether.
Well, yeah, my big concern was, or I guess my big question was whether their concern was that it was a duplication of services. It doesn't seem that. It seems like they want to make sure that everything aligns properly with other training that they might be required to have.
Right.
Yeah.
They do believe that if necessary, they could through their training program provide, let's say, look, when this program is done, there are going to be new deputies in the future. There might be a need for retraining again in 2021. So part of their report looks beyond 2020 and say, well, how are we going to, and what are we going to do for 2021? Is this a program that needs to be done again? Is this something that we built into OPATA training? So they're going beyond 2020 and looking to the future to see how they can sustain this. So.
Yeah, understood. And Mr. Gallagher, is the plan for this thing to extend beyond?
Right now, this is the first year. We're only worrying about the first year. Want to see how it goes. It's for 2,500 officers. They have the capability of doing the actually they have the capability of doing the 4,700, but right now they're doing the 2,500 to take them through the process. And it's, you don't have to if you don't want to, but it's going to be there. The anticipation, we've already had some mayors expressing interest in the Police Chiefs Association is on board. So those are two things that are important in this process. And we'll revisit it if it works like we anticipated it work, then we'll be revisiting this next year at this time. So this isn't a year end. We've got to get 2,500 through by December 31st. We have a year to do it. We'll see how it goes. We'll revisit it. If it makes sense to move forward with the other portion of the 4,700, then we'll have that discussion at the time. At least we'll have some background as to what was learned, what needs to be adjusted. But as I was telling Mr. Corey, they do have meetings every Friday. If you're interested, I can hook you up with the meeting code. It's pretty impressive. It's law enforcement is putting this together with the right people from the community, and it's to avoid what we had happen in our recent past, which I think we all agree would be a good thing. So it's 2,500 for this year. The timeline, they're not concerned about. That actually is in the proposal itself as to who's going to do what and how many they can handle. I understand the actual physical being there is a one-day process. So it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. But there is a cost to the communities for that. They're going to have to pay for that officer to attend. We're picking up the front end of it for the cost of an officer for a day or two, depending on what it takes them to get through the entire program.
And Mr. Councilman, I won't delay on completion of any of the questions.
Thank you. Are there any further questions regarding this? I don't have anything further on that other than our communications and, just a little history because you still are relatively new. One of the main reasons that we had the problems that we had over at the jail, and they were numerous, was, in my opinion, the communication that we had at the time, not just with the sheriff's department, and I'm not picking any individuals, but the administration and their legions over there that were getting in the way of questions being answered truthfully. And we ended up in a situation where bad things happened and could have been avoided in many opinions. And I don't want to get there again. So, I just need more openness from the administration regarding the council. We are an equal branch of the government. And as I have said, probably now over 100 times over the years that I've been here, we're here to help. We're not here to hinder anything. Our job is to question, and we do that. And I think we're legitimate. I don't think we're out of bounds for the most part on our questioning. And I think it's important that we do that and we get honest answers. And that's all I think we can ask of you, to give us the ability to participate in making sure this machine that we call Cuyahoga County rolls in a forward motion. We were going real good there for a while. We hit some bad patches, thought we were going real good, and I don't want to hit any more bad patches, especially when it comes to the jail, our employees, and the problems that we had. So that's my thing to you. And if there's anything from our side that we're not being upfront about, I need to hear about that. The council needs to hear about that, and we'll correct that as we go.
Chair Gallagher, may I ask a
Yes, ma'am.
quick question? Thank you. I mentioned before, and I just feel a responsibility to ask again and just put it out there. The only concern I have with the police officer training, and I do believe it's necessary, and I'm glad we're moving in that direction, but I am a little concerned about taking away perhaps what a police officer may feel he needs to do in order to control a violent situation, that he doesn't second guess himself and then perhaps put himself at risk. So just as the sheriff, I believe in the last presentation he gave us, where he was pretty definite about holding the line at the Justice Center, do what he needed to in order for no one to break through. Those are instant and needed decisions that are made. And I guess I just want to put out there, they want to make sure that we don't take that decision-making process that needs to be elevated away from that police officer or anyone in charge, because they're concerned about perhaps crossing a line that may not exist for that moment. That second guessing themselves could put them at harm. And that's all I wanted to introduce to that, and make sure that, we keep our police officers safe when they're in a position where those type of decisions have to be made.
Well, the whole purpose of the program, and again, I can't stress enough that this is made by and run by law enforcement. It does exactly what your concern is it not only makes the officer safer, it makes the community safer. And it's not just one broad brush. If you look at the packet, if you go through it again, it's pretty obvious that this is not just one little thing. This is getting into the community. This is helping the officers understand things that right now they haven't been trained on.
Yeah.
And any opportunity.
I just wanted to put out there, we talk a lot about the right things to do in situations where we're perhaps not trained for. And I just want to make sure that we don't undermine what a police officer needs to do that is elevating the situation because it's necessary to do so. That's all. I don't undermine this program. I think it's good. I'm supportive. I just wanted to just throw it out there to that be my concern. I see the
Well, I have to rely on the police chiefs knowing what they're talking about. And in my elected career, I have always gone to those that are in a position. If it's the police matter, I go to the police chief. If it's a fire matter, I go to the fire chief. I'm not a policeman, I'm not a fireman. I have to have trust in those that are in those positions. And that's who I trust in this. And if further on you have concerns, I would get you in contact with Chief Harris, who has an incredible way of taking people through any concerns that you might have.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller?
I would just like to express my strong support for what you're trying to do here. If a police officer gets into a situation where there's a danger of crossing the line, the chances are 2 or 3 steps earlier, the police officer was not well enough prepared to take actions that would have headed off the situation before you even got to that point. And so Chairman Gallagher is totally right that this training is going to make things safer for both the police officers and the community by providing the necessary training to recognize and deal with situations before they can become dangerous. And I think that's going to be beneficial to everybody.
Thank you. Sheriff, do you have a comment?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Gallagher and rest of the council. I just want to say that Mr. Gallagher, I've been on board with you. I know that we've had discussions regarding surrounding this training that they want to get going at Tri-C, and my office is in full support of that. I know that there's some things that we have to tweak along the line of our own training program. But let me say as well, let me just add for a moment that we've been doing the sheriff's office, even before I became sheriff, we've been doing scenario-based training now for quite a few years. We've used a couple different facilities over the years that allows us to, do these training scenarios using simunition, if you will, paintball otherwise, but you're utilizing an actual weapon that's fitted for that, okay, where the officers are put in shoot, don't shoot situations and are able to exercise judgment in that fashion. So, naturally there's always room for improvement on everybody's part. And we want to continue down that track as far as improving the training for our deputies and the actions that we may have to take at times. If I can for a moment, Ms. Baker, and the rest of council, I'd like to thank, these been some difficult months that we've traversed over the last 2 or 3 months with the social unrest situation and everything else. And I know we've had numerous discussions on this. And I'd like to thank you all for your support. I hope that, I've been transparent with all of you as far as making information known, giving you the tools that you need so we can work in a joint effort to move everything forward. Not only the training, but the day-to-day issues that we encounter with the jail, with the courts, and with the overall operation of the Sheriff's Department. Having said that, if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
Questions for the sheriff? Okay, well, hearing none, thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Corey, we good?
I just wanted to address your communication concerns.
Mhm.
I didn't get a chance to
Oh, I'm sorry.
tell you that. No, yeah, that's fine. When I came on board, one of the things I asked of the executive and my direct boss, Bill Mason, is what kind of communication level do I have with council? I worked as a chief assistant law director for the city of Parma for 5 years, so I had an understanding of how to work with councils. And Bill and Armin both assured me that it's the same way as you did in Parma. Keep council advised. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I think that your staff will tell you that I've been responsive when there's been questions, and I have been trying to be proactive when I see an issue. For example, heaven help us, we had our first inmate death as a result of COVID. We had an officer who died as a result of comorbidities and was COVID related. In each of those occasions, I reached out to Joe Nani to report those situations, knowing that he would, push that through. If there's a different way that you want me to work with you, sir, I'll do that. Just some other examples, because I saw it on the list and I wanted to go through some examples of where I either responded to or proactively provided information to council. There's been questions about, recently, Councilman Miller had questions and concerns about inmate voter rights, and he had ideas together with Nova on how to accomplish that. So we put together a work group, and Councilman Miller was present for that, and we have going forward steps to make sure that inmates have the right to vote. I welcome the fact that the council's on those jail update calls with Metro and Sheriff, in which they participate and ask questions all the time. I think that's unusual, and I say that in a positive sense, because you're involved in at the level of management information being fed back and forth, and I certainly support that. For the Black Lives protest that occurred on Saturday, July 17th at the admin building, I reached out to Joe Nani to let him know that that was coming and talk to him about what the sheriffs were going to do in preparation for that. Union jail response issues. When the unions have sent you concerns and us concerns and CC'd the world, I made sure we put together like a 15-point bullet response and got it to council. And video visitation, there's been multiple questions from council people on what's going on with video visitation. If inmates have a problem with it, Councilman Miller once reached out to me to get a situation fixed. And then COVID-19 status at the jail, I put together a couple of emails to council on those. If there's any concerns about specific or otherwise general, or even a tone about not being responsive to council, I will address, from my situation, I will address it immediately, because I think it's important that council be knowledgeable about it, not only for management's sake and council's sake, but for the best decision making. So I have no issues with it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
Dan Brady here.
Yeah, Dan.
I know I've been pretty quiet. You probably forgot I was here. I just wanted to say to Mr. Corey that I appreciate what you're saying in the way that you're asking about it. And it is important. It is, frankly, this legislative body was created just 10 years ago. It is a county-wide legislative body. It is similar to, but different in many ways to a suburban council. And I'm sure many members who have been on suburban councils in this body know that. Clearly, the kind of issues that we deal with on a countywide basis are very broad, very complicated, not the same as a suburban council. And we'll be glad to work with you in understanding that we have an unusual responsibility in having to provide oversight to county operations, which are pretty vast and quite complicated sometimes, along with big downtown development projects, and it goes on and on. So it's hard for us, and we have good staff, but not a large staff. And so we look forward to working with you in a more, in a way that's closer and more and clearer, so you get to know us and understand our institution a little better as time goes on here.
I'm happy to continue to grow in that role of communication with council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, no miscellaneous business?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Marty?
From the Corrections Planning Board again. I do have a couple of responses from Court Community Service related to Councilwoman Conwell's earlier questions.
Oh, good.
They did follow state protocols, closed down in all operations in March. They did not resume them until the state permitted that in May. It was mid-May. And in terms of their crews presently, when they're operating, they're issued masks, disposable gloves, hand sanitizers, the equipment they're working with, the seating on the vehicles, the high touch equipment, be it lawnmowers or blowers or whatever, are taken care of and cleaned daily. They're provided with clean vests daily, and their social distance when they are at the sign-in locations. I think they're doing everything according to what they're supposed to, right, at this point, to make sure everybody is safe.
Ms. Conwell?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Appreciate that. Okay, nothing further? We are adjourned. Thank you.